8 guests. Johnny Carson hated so much they were banned for life. The unforgiving king of late night. For 30 years, Johnny Carson ruled late-night television with that famous smile and seemingly endless charm.
America invited him into their living rooms, believing they knew the man behind the desk, the affable Midwesterner who could make anyone feel at ease. But behind that warm exterior lived another Johnny Carson entirely. A man with an unforgiving memory, deep-seated insecurities, and the power to end careers with a single word. Johnny never forgot and never forgave, revealed a former Tonight Show producer who worked with Carson for over 15 years. Cross him once, and you weren't just off that night show. You were erased from the kingdom completely. Johnny came from Nebraska, but he operated like a Sicilian, noted a longtime friend. He never raised his voice. He never made scenes in public. He simply removed people from his life completely. And given his position in the industry, that removal had consequences far beyond just losing a booking. Most shocking were the seemingly minor transgressions that could land someone on Carson's permanent blacklist. While some guests earned their bans through genuinely outrageous behavior, others found themselves exiled for offenses so subtle that they didn't realize their mistake until it was too late. Tonight, we're revealing the 8 guests who committed Carson's cardinal sins. The stars who found themselves permanently banished from television's most powerful platform, often with devastating consequences for their careers and lives. And while Joan Rivers' betrayal might be the most famous of these career-ending offenses, it was just the beginning of Carson's ruthless approach to those who crossed him. Some of these bans remained in effect for nearly 20 years, lifted only after Carson's death, made way for new hosts with no loyalty to the king's grudges. But first, let's look at the betrayal that broke Carson's heart and created the most famous feud in television history. A wound so deep that not even death could fully heal it. The betrayals. My next guest, you all know Joan Rivers. She's appearing at the Plaza 4 here in Century City. She'll be there for the rest of the week. 1. Joan Rivers, the protege's betrayal that broke Carson's heart. Joan Rivers wasn't just another comedian who appeared on The Tonight Show. She was Johnny Carson's hand-picked protégé, the woman he personally groomed to be the first permanent guest host in the show's history, a position that made her one of the most powerful women in comedy overnight. Johnny didn't just give Joan a platform. He gave her his implicit endorsement, explained a writer who worked with both comics. In an industry where women comedians were still fighting for basic respect, Carson's approval was like being Ned. He made her career. Their professional relationship had evolved into a genuine friendship over the years. Carson advised Rivers on her material, invited her to private dinners, and publicly praised her talent in an era when female comedians were routinely dismissed. For Rivers, Carson became a father figure in an industry where she desperately needed an advocate. Joan used to say that Johnny was the first powerful man in television who didn't ask for something in return for his support, revealed a longtime friend of Rivers. He championed her purely based on talent, and she was deeply grateful, which is why what happened in 1986 came as such a devastating shock to Carson. The betrayal began quietly. Fox, a fledgling network challenging the Big Three's dominance, approached Rivers with an extraordinary offer. Her own late-night talk show airing directly opposite Carson. The salary was reportedly $10 million per year, an astronomical sum that would make Rivers the highest-paid person in late night. What made the offer particularly tempting was Rivers' growing concern about her future at NBC. Despite her success as guest host, network executives had made it clear that when Carson eventually retired, Rivers would not be considered as his replacement. Joan was approaching her 50s in an industry notoriously unkind to aging women, noted a television historian. The Fox offer wasn't just about money. It was about security and ownership of her career. Rivers accepted Fox's offer, but faced an excruciating dilemma. How to tell Carson, the man who had made her career and whom she genuinely loved as a mentor and friend. She was terrified of that conversation, confirmed a producer who worked with Rivers during this period. She kept delaying it, hoping to find the perfect moment, the perfect words. That moment never came. Instead, Fox leaked the news to the press before Rivers could tell Carson personally. He learned about her defection not from her directly, but from a headline in Variety magazine. For a man whose childhood had been marked by emotional abandonment, a distant father, and a mother who withheld approval. This perceived betrayal cut to the core of Carson's deepest insecurities. Johnny went white as a sheet when he saw the headline, recalled a staff member who was present that day. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He simply said, "She didn't even call me," and walked into his office. That quiet hurt was more disturbing than any explosion could have been. Carson's response was swift and absolute. He immediately ordered that Rivers' name never be mentioned on The Tonight Show again. All clips featuring her were removed from compilation shows. Guest hosts were instructed never to reference her. It was as if she had never existed in the show's history. "He told me she's dead to me," revealed Carson's longtime producer, Fred Dordova. And when Johnny said someone was dead to him, he meant it literally. They ceased to exist in his world. Rivers attempted repeatedly to apologize. She sent letters, called Carson's private number, even sent elaborate gifts to his home. Each attempt was met with the same response: silence. The packages came back marked, "Return to sender," remembered Rivers' assistant. The calls were never returned. It was as if she was screaming into a void. The ban extended far beyond The Tonight Show. Carson's influence meant that Rivers became persona non grata throughout NBC and much of the television industry. Former friends suddenly became unavailable. Invitations dried up. Her career entered a devastating tailspin. Joan always said that losing Johnny's friendship was worse than losing The Tonight Show platform, noted a close friend. She could survive professionally, but the personal loss haunted her for the rest of her life. The ban remained in effect for the remainder of Carson's tenure and beyond. Rivers did not appear on The Tonight Show again until 2014, 22 years after Carson's retirement and 9 years after his death, when Jimmy Fallon finally invited her back. By then, Rivers had rebuilt her career through sheer determination, but the wound never fully healed. In her final years, she still became emotional when discussing Carson, telling interviewers, "He gave me my career and I heard him." That pain never goes away. T-Mobile Arena, which had just been built, and so they asked Wayne Newton, the backstage threat that crossed the line. Wayne Newton had been a frequent target of Carson's monologue jokes throughout the 1970s, particularly regarding his Las Vegas image and what Carson called his suspiciously youthful appearance. The jokes were relatively mild by Tonight Show standards, but they hit a nerve with Newton, who had spent years carefully crafting his public persona. The breaking point came in 1980 when Carson incorporated suggestive jokes about Newton's sexuality into his monologue. Implications that were particularly damaging in an era when such insinuations could destroy an entertainer's career, especially one who performed in conservative markets. What happened next became one of the most notorious backstage confrontations in television history. Wayne didn't call. He didn't have his manager complain. He showed up in person, recalled a security guard who was working at NBC's Burbank studios that day, and he wasn't there for a friendly chat. Newton bypassed normal security protocols by using his celebrity status to gain entry to the building, then made his way directly to Carson's office. According to multiple witnesses, he entered without knocking and found Carson reviewing that night's monologue cards. Johnny looked up, surprised but not alarmed at first, remembered Carson's assistant, who was present for the beginning of the confrontation. His expression changed quickly when he realized this wasn't a social call. What exactly was said remains somewhat disputed, but Newton himself has confirmed the essence of the exchange in subsequent interviews. By his own admission, he told Carson, "You can make fun of my music, you can make fun of my hair, but if you ever make another joke about my sexuality, I'll kick your ass." For Carson, who had built his career on fearless comedy and never backing down from a joke, this direct physical threat represented an unforgivable line crossed. Johnny stood up very slowly, recalled his assistant. He was significantly taller than Newton, and he used that height advantage. Without raising his voice, he simply said, "Get out of my office before I have you thrown out." The confrontation ended without physical violence, but its repercussions were immediate and permanent. Carson personally instructed his booking team that Newton was never to be invited on The Tonight Show again, a ban that remained in effect for the remainder of Carson's 30-year tenure. Johnny could handle criticism. He could handle angry phone calls. What he couldn't and wouldn't tolerate was physical intimidation, explained a producer who worked closely with Carson. In his mind, Newton had transformed from a joke target to a genuine threat. There was no coming back from that. The ban had real consequences for Newton's career trajectory. While he remained popular in Las Vegas, his national television exposure diminished significantly in the years that followed. Without access to The Tonight Show, then the essential platform for mainstream exposure, Newton's ability to promote new projects to a nationwide audience was severely limited. Being banned by Johnny didn't just mean losing one show, noted a former NBC executive. It meant losing the most important publicity vehicle in American entertainment. For someone like Newton, who was trying to expand beyond his Vegas base, it was devastating. Newton has discussed the ban in subsequent years, expressing no regrets about confronting Carson. In a 2007 interview, he stated, "I would do exactly the same thing today. Some things are worth standing up for, even if there's a price to pay professionally." What makes this ban particularly significant is how it revealed Carson's zero-tolerance policy for anything he perceived as a threat to his physical safety or the controlled environment he created at The Tonight Show. While he might forgive professional missteps or even personal slights, threatening the man himself was an offense from which there was no recovery. That was the most humble, just kind of self-acing entrance I see. 3 Charles Grodin, when confrontational comedy crossed the line. On paper, Charles Grodin should have been a perfect Tonight Show guest. Intelligent, quick-witted, and capable of the dry, slightly sardonic humor that Carson himself favored. But what began as an entertaining deviation from the standard celebrity interview format gradually evolved into something that deeply unsettled Carson, eventually resulting in one of his most puzzling but definitive bans. Grodin first appeared on The Tonight Show in the mid-1970s, promoting his breakout role in the film The Heartbreak Kid. Unlike most guests who arrived prepared to tell prearranged amusing anecdotes, Grodin took a different approach. He played an aggressively difficult version of himself, challenging Carson's questions and acting vaguely hostile toward the host. The first time he did it, Johnny was caught off guard, but played along brilliantly, remembered a writer who worked on the show. Carson was a master of improvisation, and he recognized what Grodin was doing, creating uncomfortable comedy through tension. The audience ate it up. The success of that initial appearance led to Grodin being invited back repeatedly, with each visit pushing the confrontational persona further. What had begun as light sparring evolved into increasingly hostile exchanges, with Grodin questioning Carson's interviewing skills, suggesting he hadn't read Grodin's book, and accusing him of not caring about his guests. The problem was only Johnny, and the producers knew for certain it was an act, explained a director who worked on several of Grodin's appearances. To the audience at home, it often looked like a genuinely uncomfortable interview with a difficult guest. The line between performance and reality became dangerously blurred. The breaking point came during a 1990 appearance when Grodin's act veered into territory that struck too close to Carson's personal insecurities. According to those present, Grodin began mocking Carson's delivery and questioning whether he actually cared about any of his guests or just went through the motions for a paycheck. Johnny's smile got very tight, recalled a camera operator who was working that night. There's a difference between his performance smile and his genuine smile, and anyone who worked with him knew the difference immediately. This was the forced smile that meant he was not amused anymore. What made Grodin's comments particularly cutting was that they touched on Carson's greatest personal vulnerability, his difficulty with emotional intimacy. A man who had been married 4 times and was notoriously distant, even with close friends. Carson was sensitive to any suggestion that his on-air warmth was entirely performative. Johnny played along until the segment ended, but the minute they went to commercial, he turned to his producer and said, "We're done with that," revealed a staff member who overheard the exchange. Just those 4 words. Everyone knew exactly what he meant. Grodin was never explicitly told he was banned. He was simply never booked again during Carson's remaining years on the show. When Grodin's publicists would call to suggest him as a guest, they were told politely but firmly that the show was going in a different direction or that the schedule was full. It wasn't an angry ban like with some other guests, noted a booking coordinator who worked on the show. It was more that Johnny had simply decided that particular comedic dynamic wasn't worth the discomfort it caused him. He had hundreds of potential guests to choose from. Why keep bringing back someone who made him uncomfortable, even if it was just an act? Grodin himself has acknowledged the ban in subsequent interviews, admitting that his confrontational persona might have gone too far. "I thought I was doing Andy Kaufman," he told one interviewer. But Johnny didn't find it funny. The Grodin ban illustrated something important about Carson's boundaries. While he appreciated clever comedy and even gentle ribbing, he had no tolerance for anything that undermined his authority on his own show or questioned the authenticity of the persona he had spent decades crafting. For Shelley Winters, the drink-throwing incident that ended a career. Shelley Winters was Hollywood royalty, a two-time Oscar winner whose career spanned decades and included classics like A Place in the Sun, The Diary of Anne Frank, and The Poseidon Adventure. Her talent was undeniable, but her unpredictable behavior had become legendary in the industry by the 1970s. Shelley was brilliant, but volatile, explained a director who worked with her during this period. She could be utterly charming one moment and explosively angry the next, especially if she'd been drinking, which by that point in her career was increasingly often. Carson had interviewed Winters multiple times over the years with generally positive results. She was a natural storyteller with decades of Hollywood experiences to share, and her larger-than-life personality typically made for entertaining television. But behind the scenes, The Tonight Show staff had begun to worry about her increasingly erratic behavior. She would arrive for pre-ins seeming perfectly fine, then show up for the actual taping in a completely different state, recalled a talent coordinator who worked on the show. "It became a gamble every time we booked her. Which Shelley would we get?" The incident that earned Winters her permanent ban occurred during a 1975 appearance that went catastrophically wrong, almost from the moment she walked on stage. According to multiple witnesses, Winters seemed disoriented and was noticeably slurring her words as she settled into the guest chair. Johnny tried to guide her gently through the interview, but Shelley kept interrupting, changing subjects mid-sentence and making comments that didn't quite connect to the questions, remembered a camera operator who was present that night. You could see Carson getting increasingly tense, though he was doing his best to maintain the appearance of a normal conversation. The breaking point came when Carson made what seemed to be an innocuous joke about Winters' weight, a topic she herself had addressed humorously in previous appearances. This time, however, her reaction was dramatically different. "She just snapped," said a stagehand who witnessed the incident. One second she was laughing, or at least appearing to laugh, and the next second she had thrown her entire drink right in Johnny's face. Not a splash or a sip, the entire glass of whiskey, ice cubes and all. The audience gasped. Carson, drenched and clearly shocked, maintained enough composure to quickly call for a commercial break. But according to those present, his famous self-control vanished the moment the cameras stopped rolling. He stood up dripping wet and just walked off the set without saying a word, recalled a producer. His expression was absolutely murderous. "In all my years working with him, I'd never seen him that angry." Carson retreated to his dressing room, changed his suit and tie, and returned to finish the show, a testament to his professionalism. Winters had been quickly escorted out of the building during the break. The aftermath was swift and permanent. Carson personally instructed his booking team that Winters was never to be invited on The Tonight Show again, a ban that remained in effect for the remainder of his 30-year tenure. "It wasn't just about the drink," explained a producer who discussed the incident with Carson afterward. "Johnny felt there was an unspoken contract between host and guest, mutual respect and professional behavior. Shelley had violated that contract in the most public and humiliating way possible." The ban had significant consequences for Winters' later career. The Tonight Show was the essential promotional platform for any actor with a project to promote, and losing access to Carson's couch meant losing visibility with millions of potential viewers. Her film roles were already becoming less frequent due to her age and reputation for difficulty, noted a Hollywood agent familiar with Winters' career. Losing The Tonight Show removed one of her last remaining connections to a mainstream audience. She could still work, but her days of major publicity were effectively over. Winters herself later acknowledged the ban, telling an interviewer in the 1990s that it was probably fair given her behavior that night. "I was in a bad place then," she admitted. "Johnny had every right to never want to see me again." What made the Winters ban particularly significant was how it illustrated Carson's zero-tolerance policy for any behavior that disrupted the carefully controlled environment he created at The Tonight Show. While he could forgive flubbed answers or even mild controversies, physical aggression toward the host himself was an unforgivable offense.